Let's go.
She like man we fried. Big ride this man we fried. Top right. She like man we fried. Big ride this man we fried. Top right.
Ah, big ride, make her come inside when she see the gas stick. Her eyes open wide, she like how I drive the bell motor car. The bell motor car is
big ride. Or the gal them want big ride.
Hi. And then they get lost in that song there. So I could have listened to the rest of that song. That song is vibes, real vibes. Especially since these days, big motor car, top ride. That's what everybody talking about, right? Top ride. So hi, good afternoon, folks. This is an unexpected live. That's what I will say. It's not a live that I had planned to do, or rather I should say I don't normally do a live on a Monday evening, but there was so much foolishness going on with this entire car and vehicle exemption issue, and so much foolish noise, irresponsible things taking place. And I mean, all of you would have seen many of you would have seen the Prime Minister's press conference on Saturday evening, where the issue of vehicles came up all over again, right? So we had to talk about this, and we have to talk about it because there are a number of issues that playing up here. So yesterday I'd have put up a post on my page on NewsSource, and I would have put up a couple screenshots on NewsSource, so everybody would have seen the screenshots. So you know what is I'm going to talk about this evening. So let me just pause for 2 seconds and say good evening to a couple of folks. Hi Alison, Samuel, hi Jason Wilson, hi Cletha, hi Lincoln, hi Michael, Danny, Andre, Veronica, Barbara, Jennifer, Linda, Celestine, Joseph, Peter Corby, Nola, Joel Joseph, Molly Ramke soon, Monifi from out in Tobago, hello my sister, Janet, Allison, Dolores. Good. Happy to be here. So I know some of you looked at me interview the Attorney General last evening. That was a lot of fun. I miss being in my own studio though. I like my studio because I know where everything is. I understand, what is going on. I could start up this session with a little music. I need little music to vibes myself up and thing, right? Especially, sometimes what I end up playing on the live is not what I'm playing behind the scenes as I'm getting ready. I know you all also enjoyed the interview that I did with Dr. Francis, with Lovell Francis last Friday, where we talked about education and the role and impact of education in a colonial space. And what I'm trying to do here this evening is educate us a bit about how salaries and remuneration packages, how those things work, so that we understand how the conversation is taking place around us, and we understand what our position is or isn't on an issue. Many of us, most of us as adults, we have worked or we are working. I don't want to say all are we working, because I know right now with the lockdown, there are a number of persons who are not working. And you see, when you're not working and you're seeing other people around you working and making money, it has caused pain for you. Because you want to be in a position where you have money and you could do things and you have the freedom that earning a salary, earning a regular salary does give to you. So I don't want to downplay the confidence and security that earning a salary does do for you, that earning a salary does allow you to have. Because when you know that by this date every month I'm going to have money in my pocket, or I have a certain amount of money in my bank account and that could see me through the next however many months, it gives you peace of mind. In the course of this pandemic, because there have been all of these lockdowns and shutdowns and roll back and roll forward, there has been a lot of uncertainty. Some people don't know if they're working this week, if they're not working next week. And because they don't know if they're working this week and they're not working next week, and if the sector that they're in gets shut down next week, then they're not likely to know how long the sector going to be shut down for, because everything is contingent on infection rates and bed availability. It causes a lot of anxiety. And that anxiety can lead to various stages of panic. And because it can lead to various stages of panic, you could have all kinds of hysteria going on, especially when you are there thinking that the reason I'm in this situation where I can't work is because of politicians. Because that's how many persons are thinking of these lockdowns and these restrictions. They think that the lockdowns and the restrictions happening arbitrarily and randomly because that's what because politicians just dreaming up these lockdowns. Once you pause and think about it, and you're looking at what is going on in the rest of the world, the number of countries, 1 week they're easing up. Next week, state of emergency. Today alone, I've seen several countries and several places in other parts of the world when new lockdowns. 2 weeks ago, thing was free and nice. Now today, a lockdown. Japan, just last week, implemented a state of emergency, weeks away from the Olympics, after they had a couple of weeks of freeing things up and thinking, well, okay, all right, things will be nice. Now they're worried, they're concerned about another wave of infection. So they're back into a state of emergency. So as a result of that, you have plenty of uncertainty. And because you have all of this uncertainty and because you have all of this panic and anxiety, people are often looking for who to blame for the situation that they're in. And we have an attitude here where we don't really like to take responsibility for our actions. So many of us don't want to admit that it's individual behavior, community behavior, group mentality that has led to increased infection. Nobody wants to admit that whatever you was a part of, whether it was vigil, whether it was zessin, whether it was going out in large groups to do physical outdoor activities, whether it's not wearing your mask properly, whether it's not social distancing properly, whether you're allowing people in and out your home without proper health protocols in place, we do not want to admit that we, in and of ourselves, have had a critical role to play in infection rates going up. Now, when infection rates go up, the government has two options. The government could come on TV and radio and wherever else and beg and plead and ask people, well, you wash all your hands, wear all your masks, and maintain all your distance now. They could do that repeatedly. But if we continue to not do the things that need to be done, then the government has to make a decision. Are we going to just leave people to do what need to marshal themselves? Or do we then have to marshal people and implement restrictions? So what the government has done is, once it saw that the health system was going to collapse, and I mean we've had Dr. Abdul Richards come out and say it was going to collapse. We've had Dr. Hines come out and say it was going to collapse. We've had Dr. Trotman come out and buff us. So when the state is seeing that the health system here is likely to collapse, the parallel healthcare system is likely to collapse. And if the parallel healthcare system collapses, then it means that the regular healthcare system is going to be compromised, which then means everything could be compromised. They have to implement measures. And the measures they have to implement are measures that are going to prevent people from gathering, from congregating, to prevent movement, pretty much. So restrictions came, and the restrictions were pretty severe. Very, very, very strict restrictions were put in place on why a number of sectors on lockdown. This is just as things had started to kind of feel like there could be some kind of normalcy, right? Because there were a number of things happening. Remember, people had started back doing small live shows. Cinemas had started back operating. There was in-house dining in restaurants. Though, at 50% capacity, those things had begun to take place. And then, with the numbers increasing, with the numbers exploding, with the deaths increasing in a very, very, very frightening way, the restrictions had to come in place. So the restrictions came into place. People were willing to take the restrictions, I think, for maybe a month. I really and truly think that plenty people figured, well, all right, if we could do this for a month, if in a month's time it started, and the numbers start to go down, we could ban withdraw for a month. But the banning of the draw for the month then extended into a second month because numbers were not yet low enough. And because numbers were not yet low enough, and the extension went into 2 months, things became very intense for everybody. In the midst of all of that, because all of this is me explaining to all you here how we reach where we reach in terms of all of this argument about vehicle. In the midst of all of that, a private entity, I think is South Park decided that it was going to do a hamper drive. Now, just about 2 weeks before South Park had decided to do that hamper drive, remember we had that mass vaccination fiasco where the Ministry of Health had decided it was going to be doing mass vaccinations, but mass vaccination for persons over a particular age, the elderly, and persons with comorbidities if they were around a particular age. And thousands of persons showed up at all health centers all over the country because people see free vaccination, first come, first serve. They ain't check to see the other details. And everybody, so it was a Wednesday morning. I remember that clearly because when it started the Wednesday morning, by the time the 11 o'clock press conference had taken place, the minister had to come on and apologize. And then there was like about a day or two of high numbers at all the health centers. And of course, people get pong and lash left, right, and center. And everybody started to call for dialysing head on a silver platter and etc. Right, all of those things, right? So that took place. And not too long after that, I think 2 weeks after that, 2, maybe 3 weeks after that, South Park decided that it was going to do a hamper drive. Now, bear in mind that the Ministry of Agriculture had already begun to roll out its food baskets, right? So it was doing its food basket, and it was doing its food basket drive through the various MPs. So MPs and local government councillors were supposed to go and collect, or actually NAMDEVCO was delivering food baskets to the various MP offices or municipal corporations. And they were also dropping off frozen chicken, right? So two chickens per I think it was 2 chickens per household. So they were dropping off large numbers of chickens and stuff and vegetables and fruit to either MPs or local government persons. And in the midst of that, a private entity, I'm not sure why, South Park decided that it was not going to partner with, let's say, an NGO, or partner with the government, or partner with any sort of organization that would have a list of names of persons in need. Because you see, there's a critical thing, right? MPs, local government councillors, and religious organizations, which are the three organizations, three sets of organizations through whom the government would have been distributing relief. They tend to have a database of information with persons that are most in need. So persons who are most vulnerable, they tend to have that sort of information. So they will distribute to persons who fall on the at-risk list, right? On most in need. South Park did its hamper drive, and its hamper drive was just pretty much open to whomever. I ain't have an issue with you deciding that you're doing a hamper drive and you're opening up the hamper drive to whomever, but that hamper drive needed to come with clear structure and order. Clear structure and order. So when the pictures and video footage started to come in of the hamper drive that was meant to take place that Saturday morning, what you saw was long lines of persons not obeying regulations, the distancing regulations. I don't know, I can't say whether they were wearing masks or not, because I was just seeing footage that was showing way too many persons clustered up in an area. And with all of the chaos that was taking place there, of course the organizers had to cancel it. Now, in this 2021, with a pandemic going on, if I going to organize an event like that, I'm not asking people free sheet to come down to collect, because all kinds of persons, regardless of whether they're working or not working, are actually in need, right? I am not of the opinion that is only certain persons who are in need. It are persons who working, or households where at least one person working, but things tight because one person lost their income, their source of income, and so the household went from functioning on 2 income to 1 income, and the 1 income it functioning on might be significantly smaller than what they would have been accustomed to functioning on before. So it have homes where things tight, right? And everybody is a struggle, is a balance, is a tightrope that everybody walking. So I get that. I get it entirely. But I am there thinking to myself, why the organizers of that hamper drive didn't put better systems in place? All they're running our business. All they're running our whole big business. So systems and procedure can't be something that escaping all you. Right? It can't be escaping all you. So whether the persons who showed up for hampers did so out of mischief or didn't do so out of mischief, I am still going to say that the organization that set up the hamper distribution, they have a responsibility for ensuring that they protected people's health, right? That's, for me now, that was the critical thing. When I saw the crowd that day, I thought to myself, but this company, this business that set up this hamper drive, they don't care about people's health. Because if you're doing something like that and you care about people's health, you will put structures in place. Because when hampers are being distributed by local government councillors, when hampers are being distributed by the MP's office, when hampers are being distributed by religious organizations, whether it's church, mandir, mosque, they have systems in place. Persons are told what day they can come. In many instances, they are given times, like a time range, to show up to be able to collect the food baskets and whatever. And of course, there are stations for washing hands before you go to collect what it is you have to collect. So I looked at what took place there and I thought to myself, there's a kind of madness. And this business, this organization that set up this hamper drive, think this thing through. Because what they're doing there, while on the surface it might be good that they're trying to hand out, they're trying to give out relief to people, the way in which they're going about distributing the hampers and providing relief can cause greater harm in terms of infection spread. So to me, it was almost like it was negligent. Incredibly negligent. It didn't look organized at all. In any case, I saw the footage. It got shut down, right? And they spoke to hi Rain Man, nice to see you. And they spoke to one of the persons who was part of the organization of it. And he was begging people to go home and apologizing and whatever. And then media reached out to Minister Donna Cox, Minister of Social Development and Family Services. And Minister Cox responded to a question I was asked of her. And she talked about there being persons who are in need versus persons who are in greed, right? And I will say this. I don't think the statement that the minister herself made was incorrect. It's not an incorrect statement. But the minute I heard the statement, I knew that the statement was going to be twisted for mischievous purposes. Because there are persons that are in need and there are persons that are in greed. And I felt the minister should have just not have said anything at all when media reached out to her. Because time and again, we have seen that media is very good at cutting and pasting responses from an event to suit a particular narrative. So next thing you know, the minister makes the comment about there are persons who are in need and there are persons who are in greed. And all you are hearing thereafter is who greedy and who greedy and who greedy. That is what started to take place after that. So it was a set of this one greedy, this one talking about who greedy, who greedy, who greedy. And it went from Minister Cox saying there are persons who are in need to persons who are in greed, to Minister Cox has said people are greedy, to Minister Cox saying opposition people greedy, and it started to go down a particular path and it got again twisted and racist. And that's what, I mean, listen, there are any number of things when the day come, I just want to comment on. I just want to pass them out on. And I just have to pause and say, you know what? Don't say anything on this particular issue. Because this is something that could get nasty, and it could get nasty real fast. So, it became nasty. It was made nasty. It was twisted. Nobody seemed to remember that just last year, when Inshan Ishmael was doing his own hamper drive at the start of the pandemic, he made comments about how greedy people showing up for hampers, right? And they come in and they want to take more than one hamper and they don't need to and nobody remembered. No, those things were not raised, right? And the opposition, let me just go with the opposition. The opposition made it into a thing. So it became this huge thing. And the next thing you know, MP Monilal then made a comment because they were adamant by this point in time about reinforcing this idea of there being greed coming out of the government, right? Because the whole idea now is to build the idea that the government has shut down the country for its own benefit. I don't know if you all are paying attention to the things coming out of opposition pages. So you have Suzette Lowe, you have Philip Edward Alexander. I see Marsha Lorraine Walker, who had gone up against Dr. Rowley and Diego Martin West, all of a sudden has popped up from nowhere again and talking about how the state of emergency is meant to prevent people from protesting and to stifle people's rights. And I'm like, but everybody know a state of emergency does suspend your rights though. And the same people who was calling for a state of emergency 3-4 months ago, all you forget the UNC was calling for a state of emergency. The UNC was calling for a state of emergency, you know. The opposition was literally calling for a state of emergency, asking when they're going to be a state of emergency, insisting that the country be shut down, insisting on a lockdown, calling for a curfew. People forget that. All you forget that. So the very opposition that 3-4 months ago was calling, demanding, bellowing, bawling like a cow for a state of emergency and a curfew. And they was even asking for a stricter curfew. Me know if all remember that. 4 months ago, the opposition was asking for a curfew and a state of emergency. 4 months ago, the opposition was, listen, they was beating curfew and state of emergency like a road march. And when the Prime Minister implemented the curfew the first time around, when he first implemented the curfew, there were people asking for a more intense curfew. All you forget that. There were people who were basically saying make it 6 to 6. Not 5 to 9 p.m. Sorry, you know what I mean? The curfew lifts between 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. There were persons saying make it so that from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew. And people had to come out and point out to them, hey, if people had to reach to work, and when they had to go home, business will have to close up faster, open later and close up faster, right? So I want you to remember that 3-4 months ago, the same opposition that bellowing now for open back up, the same set of people who asking now when we opening back up and why we can't open back up. It's the same set of people 3-4 months ago was bawling and saying the government needs to put harsher measures in place. The government needs to implement a curfew. The government needs to implement a state of emergency. The government needs to lock the place back down. I want all to remember that. Right? You see, short-term memory and amnesia, that's not going to help us, you know. Only need to start to remember. Because this opposition will not pick a struggle. It is going to gaslight you to death. It is going to gaslight you into sheer anxiety and panic. So, with the whole business of lockdown and hampers, you need to bear this in mind. It was looking at type of way that the Ministry of Agriculture, through NAMDEFCO, was handing out hundreds and thousands of hampers on a weekly basis, right? So it was tens of thousands of hampers that have been handed out on a weekly basis. And of course, people start to ask, what the opposition doing in all of this? What the opposition and the people who support the opposition, what they doing in all of this? So when South Park do the hamper drive, and Minister Cox make her statement, and everybody jump on the greed part of their piece, the need and greed statement. The next thing that came now was the opportunity to say, look how greedy the government is. In the middle of a pandemic, with people not working, and them still getting the salary. So it have people who not getting the salary, and them still getting the salary. Look what it is they're doing. They're buying big car, right? That was the message. So MP Munilal would have come out and he would have talked about Dayal Singh's car and Minister Young's car. So the Minister Health car, the Minister Energy car. And then that started to get beat like a road march too. So Dayal Singh car, I think it was Dayal Singh and a Prado, right? And then wherever it is Stuart Young driving, I'm not sure. But it started with Stuart Young car. And you know media in this country don't think for itself at all. Me and think that in all the media houses we have here, with all the journalists we have here, I don't think it have one working synapse, with all of them, right? Not one working synapse, because nobody does pause and say, let me bring sense to the conversation. Let me bring sense to the discussion. So they start up this thing where they're carrying on about the Alsing vehicle. Then when I saw this set of all noise about the Alsing's vehicle, right? I looked at it and I was like, whatever. This is normal with the opposition. They always like to come and talk about people's car and people's salary. And when they're talking about your car and your salary, is when they talk about what you look like and who you're sleeping with. That's a norm. It is strict gutter politics with the opposition at every turn, right? There's never going to be a situation where the opposition has paused and discussed an issue on its merits, on its actual merits. It is always going to be ad hominem attacks, right? Good. So they start about the Alsing car, and the whole thing is the Alsing greedy because the Alsing buy this car. I think it's a Prado. Then Stuart Young, greedy because Stuart Young buy a car. But in the midst of all of that, nobody talking about the fact that the same UNC opposition that calling other persons greedy have in and of themselves purchased vehicles during this time. So all you know, my inbox always busy. So because my inbox always busy, strong breeze blow into my inbox, and boom shot, I get this, right? Somebody set it up, send it for me, and I get that. So I see this and I say to myself, Munilal and them jump out itself to talk about who purchasing Prado and who purchasing wherever it is. And here you have, boom, Ravi Ratiram having purchased a Prado. And I want to make it very clear, I don't have an issue with MP Ratiram having purchased a Prado. What I have an issue with is the hypocrisy of the opposition. All you know, right, that all you have access to the same vehicle exemption, the same VAT and motor vehicle tax exemption that the government have access to is the same VAT and motor vehicle exemption that the opposition has access to. Both sides of the house. Persons from both sides of the house could show up and buy the same kind of vehicle. What does have me wondering though is how people on one side of the house who making a basic salary of $17,000 a month paying for vehicles as expensive as this, right? How are you meeting all your monthly payments? Because what does get exempt is the VAT and the motor vehicle tax. But you still have the other things. You still have other prices you have to pay. So you'll get your VAT exemption, you'll get your motor vehicle tax exemption, right? But you still have other things that you have to pay. So how will you just make these payments on a salary of $17,000? So it's the hypocrisy with the opposition that got me upset. So you have Ravi Ratiram and you have Saddam Hussein. Both of them, April this year, right? April this year, when numbers started to pick up, because remember, numbers started to pick back up from end of March, right? We sit down right here and we looked at the epidemiology charts and we saw that numbers was picking up from the end of March. So by April, numbers was beginning to get high, and the end of April into May, that is when the spike started to take place, right? So the hypocrisy, right, where I am sure they knew that members of Parliament on the opposition side accessing the same exemption as members of the government was taking place. But they're carrying on. So I watched the carrying on and I said, but okay, why all of this hypocrisy? Then they decide today that the issue now is not that, because, let me slow this down. Because at first, the whole problem was Deyalsing and Young accessed the exemption during the pandemic, right? That is what Monilal come out and say. Monilal come out and make a statement, and the gist of the statement is that it showed insensitivity because they accessed their motor vehicle tax exemption during a pandemic when it have people who not working and people who in need. And so look at how greedy these ministers are. So then I make sure I put up this thing with Saddam, and I put up the exemption from Ravi Ratiram, which would have taken place just a couple months ago in the height of the thing. And lo and behold, today the narrative changed. So it's no longer that they're greedy because they access it during the height of the pandemic. Here's what the argument is now. The argument today, because with them, the goalposts shift every 2 minutes, right? You cannot play football with the opposition because the goalpost changes every single time you can challenge their position on something. They shift the goalpost. So the goalpost now is people who abuse the exemption. And we're going to get into how this exemption took place. But when they started to talk about people who abuse the exemption, that is when I say to myself, I had to put up Monilal exemptions. Because Monilal is a man. Since you want to talk about abusing exemptions, right? This is 2017 for MP Monilal. MP Monilal would have gotten a Jaguar in 2017. And the Jaguar, the market price of the Jaguar would have been $754,985, right? So he get an exemption of $94,000 and $29,000. And so his total exemption from VAT, motor vehicle tax and customs duty came up to $324,358.13. Look the figure in the middle there, right? For you to see. So in 2017, I'm going to put myself back up. In 2017, he accesses his motor vehicle exemption, his VAT and motor vehicle exemption feature in his remuneration package. He accesses it. Me and have a problem with this, you know. I don't have a problem with this because you are entitled to it. It's there in your remuneration package. Then, 2019, he accesses it again. And let me make it very clear, I still have no issues with the fact that he accessed the vehicle exemption. Why? Because he is entitled to it according to his remuneration package, according to the industrial relations package that he would have signed off on, right? Every 2 years, he can access this exemption. So when you start to talk about all who abusing and who not abusing, are we really, really ready to sit down and have a conversation about who buying vehicles every 2 years and they're buying the vehicles at a reduced cost because of course they're not paying VAT, they're not paying motor vehicle tax, they're not paying customs duty, right? So you're not paying any of those things. You're buying the vehicle at a reduced cost. And when you sell the vehicle, you are selling it back at the market price. I'm not saying that he has done that, but I'm saying that other persons have done that. I have no idea what he has done with his vehicles. I can't talk about what the MP has done with his vehicles. I will say that I am in a position to comment on the fact that 2 years in a two consecutive 2-year periods, 2017 and then 2019, he was in a position to access the motor vehicle exemption. And he accessed the motor vehicle exemptions. Is he paying for both vehicles? Does he still own both vehicles and still have payments to make? And if he still have both vehicles and have payments to make, how are we managing that on a basic salary of $17,000 a month? Right? How is he managing that on a basic salary of $17,000 a month? Because your MP salary, the basic part, I'm not talking about the various allowances, because he have various allowances. Me and count up them allowances on them, right? But how is he managing to pay the kind of installment and insurance that vehicles them price going and come up to? How? I'm not saying that he can't do it, I just asking how. Because we just like to talk big, talk about explain your wealth, right? Them men that stand up in the parliament debating legislation and talking about, well, where the money go on and where the money come from and explain your wealth. In a situation like this, that's where my questions would be. If Saddam Hussein, Ravi Ratiram, and Rudal Munilal are making a basic salary of $17,000, not inclusive of their various allowances, how are they paying the installments and the insurance, the annual insurance on these expensive vehicles? That's all I ask. Me ain't saying that they're not entitled to it. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that anybody not entitled to it, right? So, that is people motor vehicle exemption. I'll come back to talk about our next motor vehicle exemption in a little bit, but there's something I wanted to move to now. Most of you, or many of you, remember me from back in 2016 with the President Carmona issue, right? When I started to talk about Carmona and the housing allowance, I was able to talk about Carmona and the housing allowance from the perspective of a particular public document. So we're going to look at that public document now. Yes, no. I moved to the wrong page. Right. So, when I was making noise about Carmona and the housing allowance, I was able to find out what the president is supposed to have access to by way of salary, well, his whole remuneration package, from something referred to as the Salary Reviews Commission report. So I want to explain this. The office of the president in this country, everybody thinks that MPs and government ministers just determine their own salaries. That is far from the truth. They don't determine their own salaries. Their salaries, the entire remuneration package, gets determined by the Salary Reviews Commission, right? What parliamentarians get to determine or get to debate and vote on will be their pension and emoluments, right? So they can determine what their pension plan going to look like, but they don't get to determine what their salaries look like. There is a commission referred to as the Salary Reviews Commission. That commission answers to the president. And so that's why back then there was for me, from my perspective, a huge conflict of interest, because the Salary Reviews Commission answers to the president. The president decide to do it as he want with his remuneration package. He decided he'd taken both the housing allowance and the free housing, and the Salary Reviews Commission said nothing, went silent, turned a blind eye. Why? Because they're the boss. That's the man who appoint them. That's the man who put them in whatever position they're in. So you actually had a member of the Salary Reviews Commission then coming out and defending the president as if it was okay for the president to get both the housing and the housing allowance, right? Now, the Salary Reviews Commission has a very important role to play. They sit down and they look at a wide range of offices and office holders here. God boy, I hope I can. What's the page number? 221. Let me go back to the start of this thing. for you to see. I want all you to see the various offices that it impacts on, right? So you have, give me a second. This Salary Reviews Commission has oversight of the remuneration package for a number of offices and office holders in this country. The President of the Republic, the higher level of the judiciary, the Ombudsman, the Auditor General, the Industrial Court, the Tax Appeal Board, the Environmental Commission, the Police Complaints Authority, the Equal Opportunity Tribunal, top managers in the public service. So it impacts on public servant salaries too at a particular level. Senior officers in the protective services and the defense force, senior diplomatic representatives, chairmen and members of the commissions and boards, the judicial and legal service, and just now. That's part one. Whoops. Oh, I reached quite there. I want to get okay. It only showing you. Oh, where does it talk about part two? For part two, it is members of, it's like the members of parliament. Right. This is the page that allows you to see. Right. So part one of the report goes from the President of the Republic to the Judicial and Legal Service. Part two, the members of parliament, the Tobago House of Assembly, local government officials. So this report gives you a wide range of office holders across the public sector. And it talks about the remuneration package of a wide range of persons, right, across the public sector. And these are the categories, right? So it has some 300 categories of offices and approximately 900 persons or posts, right, that fall under the Salary Reviews Commission. So they determine, they sit down, they assess after doing comparative analysis and looking at best practice in other parts of the world. They assess and come up with recommendations for the remuneration package. Why am I saying all of this? I'm saying this because we have a huge problem in this country where we just like to measure one another's salary and one another remuneration package and envy people and bad talk people and wish malice on people. I don't know if you remember when the Petrotrin refinery was going to be closed down for Petrotrin to be restructured. Or remember that? Anybody here remember that? I mean, apart from Vonette, because I know Vonette on the live. I've seen her from time to time on the live. And Vonette, shout out. I hope you noticed that when I went and see your mister yesterday, I did not touch him and I represented. I call your name and them kind of things. So, right? But when Petrotrin when the refinery had to be shut down for the restructuring of the entity that was Petrotrin, all you remember how much noise we make when we were hearing about some of the salaries of Petrotrin workers? All you remember how much noise we make? How vexed we get when we hear what this person making at Petrotrin and what that person making at Petrotrin and what the next person making at Petrotrin? All you remember that? And we was baying for the blood of Petrotrin workers. We do that very often here. Very often here. We just be watching one another's salary, watching one another pocket, and we want to drag down one another. All the time. Based on the fact that we think, well, you making more money than me, and I don't like the fact that you making more money than me. So, some of the things we need to understand is the way salaries in the public sector are structured. The higher the salary gets at the top, the higher the salary at the bottom can get. So when you start to cut the salary of persons up top, it has a trickle-down effect for you on the bottom. And you need to stop and think about those things. Because when you start to ask for people up top to have their remuneration package be made smaller, you then have to ask yourself, how is that going to have a knock-on effect on my salary down at the bottom? Because if you think that cutting the salary of persons up top is going to mean that they're closer in salary to you, I have a bridge to sell you. Because that is not how salary structures work. The minute you start to cut salaries, restrict salaries, remove perks and benefits up here, it begins to have an impact on the salaries, perks, and benefits of the persons that are lower down on the salary scale. And it's like, oh, Liana, people showed a whole ass last week and this week, you know. Because I watching how media going after Dale Singh and Stewart. And I'm thinking to myself, this is an industrial relations issue. This is a salaries and remunerations issue. This is not an issue of who greedy and who not greedy. This is part of somebody's agreed to remuneration package. I have a remuneration package that gives me access to a book grant and a travel research grant. Now, I don't have to, you don't get the book grant every month in your salary, or the research and travel grant, but you can access it, and it is there and available to me to access. So if I need to buy tech equipment, if I need to buy books, if I need to buy there are a number of things that fall under what I can purchase with the book grant, because it's an education grant, right? Once it is there for me to access, I can access it because it's part of my legally agreed to package. Now, if you and I working at the same institution, I want you to grasp this. If me and you working at the same institution, then it means that you and I agreed to work there. We sign off on our package, right? We sign off on our contract. We get offered the opportunity to work at the place. We sign off on the contract. We agree to sign off on the contract and accept the remuneration package. If my remuneration package looking better than your remuneration package, and you then decide, well, I greedy because I accessing the things that I signed off on, something wrong with you. Something real wrong with you, because it means that you don't understand how industrial relations and human resource and remuneration packages does work. I can't think of anybody who will agree to a salary, sign off on the salary, and then voluntarily decide to take a pay cut. Nobody does volunteer to take a pay cut. So when you turn around and you start talking about these ministers should take a pay cut, these ministers should forego the exemption, you need to stop and think about a number of things. You need to pause and think to yourself, if these ministers forego the vehicle exemption, then what? Where do we want to see this go? Where do we want to see this end up? Are we then going to say, after a while, that we don't want them to have a travel allowance either, and we don't want them to have other benefits? So let's go down. Let me go back down now to Oops, I reached too far down. All right, this is ministers of government. I want to go to MPs. I want to let us see what MPs making. Now, this report is on Google, right? This report is on Google. So if all you want, or could anybody free to go online and search the Salary Reviews Commission report. The 98th report is one, a useful one to look at. So right, this is the leader of the opposition remuneration package. A base salary of $29,590 a month, right? She has a subsistence allowance of $1,500 a month, housing allowance of $12,360 a month, entertainment allowance, telecommunications facilities, committee service allowance. So every committee she sits on, she earns about I think it might be $3,000 a month per committee for committee service allowance. And then if she's the chairman of the committee. If she's a member of the committee, $1,500 allowance. And then of course, they talk about pension and gratuity. Now, let me tell you something. I'm not a fan of Kamla Persad-Bissessar. I think everybody here knows this because I don't make it a secret that I am not a fan of Kamla Persad-Bissessar. I have no issues whatsoever with Kamla Persad-Bissessar's remuneration package. None. Even though I think that she is lazy and she don't do she work when the month come. It have 300,000 persons in this country that voted for the party that she's political leader of, and by virtue of the fact that them 300,000 people voted for Kamla Persad-Bissessar, I have no right to turn around and say Kamla cannot collect her salary or ought not to collect her salary, right? And she basic salary, she allowance, she exemptions, all of those things, she entitled to that because 300,000 people decided we want she party, we want her there, right? And she has become the opposition leader as a result of that. So I not going to jump up and talk about Kamla not deserving of and she ain't supposed to this, that and the other. I will say that I don't think she's do her job. I don't think she does work. I think she is very much like those public servants that many of us don't like, who lazy, worthless, this barely show up to work, and even when they're there, their productivity levels is be at zero. You could say that. But because she has gotten her instruments of office, I can't say that she cannot get her remuneration package, that she can't get her salary. To me, if it's anybody I would turn around and say greedy, I would say it's Kamla. Because Kamla don't do she work and she collecting the salary. But she entitled to she salary. Why? Because 300,000 people say, yeah, we voting for she. We voting for her political party. So let's look at the remuneration package of persons in the House of Representatives, right? So just the regular MPs. Right. And there's something that we have to talk about here. So their salary, $17,410 a month. That's the salary. We're not looking at transport facilities because what pertains here in this 98th report is not what was eventually agreed to. So this 98th report actually has a cap on the price of vehicles and the amount of tax and the amount of VAT, right, that they can access. And this is what we're going to discuss in short order. So a salary of $17,410, transportation allowance, and the figure is there, $4,920 a month, or if the office holder represents a constituency located beyond 50 kilometers from Port of Spain, it will be $5,040. So if the constituency far from Port of Spain, you get a higher transportation allowance, right? You have a subsistence allowance, you have an entertainment allowance, you have a committee service allowance, the same $3,000 or $1,500, and then of course your pension and gratuity. Those are the allowances that are available to the Member of Parliament. Let us now look at what pertains as the the transport exemption. So this is what is the exemption. So you have a maximum loan of $350,000 at a rate of interest of 6% per annum, repayable over a period of 6 years, right? A new motor vehicle with full exemption from motor vehicle tax, value-added tax, customs and duties, or a used motor vehicle with full exemption from special motor vehicles tax, value-added tax and customs and duty, right? So, full exemption. This is what still pertains. And this is from the 89th report. I want to make something clear. The salary part, salary and allowances part, that was agreed to is in the 98th report. The vehicle exemption thing is from a prior report. Why? Because back in late 2013, early 2014, when the Salary Reviews Commission when the Salary Reviews Commission 98th report was laid in Parliament, it had big tantana in the People Parliament. Let me show you the story. So back February 2014, both the opposition and the government challenged the 98th report of the Salary Reviews Commission. Why? Because they felt that parts of the report did not truly reflect the kind of work that they had to do as MPs and ministers. So they felt that some of what was recommended as their package was not in keeping with the kind of work they had to do, so they did not accept the entire 98th report. So that's why, even though the 98th report has caps on how much customs, VAT, and motor vehicle exemption you can have, what they stuck with was the older report, right? Was parts of the older report. So they kept that exemption from the prior report, where they get the full exemption. The full exemption. So now that I have said that, what's the point that I'm trying to make here? There are multiple points that I'm trying to make. The first point that I'm trying to make is politicians are persons in positions of power. Because when you get into the legislature, when you get into the parliament, you're making laws. And you could go about making laws to benefit people if you are open to bribery and corruption. If you are a government minister, you have access to budgets and votes, so money, right? When I say votes, I'm not talking about staining your finger in ink. I'm talking about votes with money in it. So as a government minister, you're passing laws, you have access to budgets. As an MP, you're passing laws, and you can be persuaded, bribed, corrupted to do things in a particular way. So one of the ways to prevent people from becoming open and susceptible to bribery is to pay them a good remuneration package, to give people a package that will make them less susceptible to bribes and bribery. And at the start of the Salary Reviews Commission report, they spoke to that. They talked about having to present officials with packages that are much more attractive to them and on par with what is taking place in the open market. So of course that way you're preventing persons from being open to bribe and bribe taking. Because it's not just politicians and ministers, it's not just ministers and MPs that could be open to bribes. Remember this thing covering judges, it covering people in local government, it covering people in the THA, it covering high-ranking public servants who does actually sign off on the public accounts. So you want to ensure that you're paying people attractively enough to prevent them from taking a bribe and possibly losing their job. That is, listen, we talk all the time about wanting to be more like Singapore, right? About wanting to be more like other developed countries in the world. And this is precisely what other developed countries in the world do. They pay their public officials as if they are CEOs and vice presidents and executives of corporations. That's how they pay their public officials. They pay their public officials in a particular way to prevent them or to lessen the likelihood of them being open to bribery. I'm not saying that it's impossible to bribe. I'm just saying that the point of paying people properly and adequately is, of course, to motivate them to do their work efficiently and to reduce the possibility of corruption and bribery. So why would we be arguing for a situation where we paid our high-ranking government officials, government ministers, and MPs less money and then put them in a position, an even greater position, of being exposed to bribery and corruption? Why? Why? Why would we do that? Why would we pause and decide that we're going to be eyeing down other people's salary? People whose jobs we aren't doing. People whose shoes we're not standing in. Why are we going to be looking at their salaries and deciding, you know what? Because I'm not earning a living, them shouldn't earn a living either. Why? Why should I decide because I'm making a smaller salary than Vonette? Vonette shouldn't be making a salary at all. Why? Why would I do that? It doesn't make sense. And so to jump on this narrative that the opposition has begun, that the media take up, and everybody running with, oh, they have car and they have vehicle exemption, and why they have that, and they're so greedy, and that's part of their remuneration package. If you get a remuneration package where you get a travel allowance or you get a vehicle allowance, and that package allowing you to be able to pay your installment on your vehicle or insure whatever it is insuring, you're going to give it up. If you're doing the work when the month come, you willing to give up your perks and benefits? Answer, and you not to answer me, answer yourself honestly. Answer yourself honestly. You willing to give up your perks and benefits? Nobody ever willing to give up their perks and benefits. But there are situations with this vehicle exemption where there is abuse. It is not that there isn't abuse. I started talking about the areas for abuse earlier on. I told you that it's very possible for you to buy the vehicle if you are a government minister or an MP, or any of the other office holders that have access to this motor vehicle exemption. It is possible for you to get the vehicle at a reduced rate and then you're selling it back at the market value. So then it means that you can make some money off of this vehicle purchase. Right? There is that. You also have situations where there are persons who are accessing the exemption, but they're also using state-owned vehicles. So imagine your ministry or the office that you are in buys a company car, a company vehicle, and you're using the company vehicle, but you have also purchased a vehicle for yourself with the exemption, and you're using the vehicle, you're using the company vehicle for personal reasons, for private reasons, and you also have the vehicle that you bought with the exemption. So there are ways in which persons are abusing the use of state purchased vehicles as well as the vehicles that they are buying with the vehicles they have purchased with the exemption. And there has to be an end to these things. So there has to be more compliance. Those kinds of restrictions, or rather, those kinds of standards need to be put in place. And they need to be put in place for no other reason than these things are actually, they actually have an impact on the taxpayers. Right? They have an impact on the taxpayers. So it ought not to be a situation where people could be abusing the perks and the benefits that they have available to them. I think everybody should be in a position to access the perks and benefits they have available to them, but not to abuse the perks and benefits available to them. And as we talk about abusing a perk and benefit available to you, this is the last exemption we're going to look at. In the Parliament last year, people just forget. I don't forget. Maybe because me and nothing, me not too much more excitement going on when the day come. My Friday afternoons is be me sitting down, glued to a screen watching Parliament channel, right? But in the Parliament last year, a piece of bacchanal break out inside the lower house, right? So this is the exemption form for the MP for Point-a-Pay. A Mercedes-Benz AMG G63 would have been purchased in his name, and the cost of the vehicle is $1.4 million, right? $1,416,292.65. Actually, no. That's not the cost of the vehicle. The cost of the vehicle is 2.3. That's it. $2,344,752.16. So the amount of money that was exempted, the amount of exemption that he was able to avoid was 1.4 million, right? Just calling all them numbers make me thirsty. Lord have mercy. So David Lee purchased a Benz with $2.3 million. And he gets $1.4 million off the Benz. Which means he basically paid $1 million for a vehicle that is worth $2.3 million. One of the things that came up in the Parliament is that while the vehicle is owned by him, because it's in his name, there's a belief that he's not the person who's actually driving the vehicle. So here's what the problem is. The problem that presents itself here is that there's a possibility that you could be purchasing a vehicle, getting the exemption for purchasing the vehicle, but you're not purchasing the vehicle for yourself, for your personal use. So I might decide that I purchase in a vehicle. Let's say I'm a member of Parliament. I purchase in a vehicle, I get in the exemption, but it's not me who actually using or driving the vehicle. So somebody else, while I may have purchased the vehicle, somebody else driving the vehicle. And then once the 2-year period passes, I could sell the vehicle to that person. Right? So that's one of the possible ways that this exemption can be abused. And that's why checks and balances have to be put in place. Yes, Natasha Thompson, it is exactly like people who get HDC houses, but they're not living in the house. Somebody else living in the house. It mightn't even be a position where they're renting it out to somebody else, They get the HDC house and they get it under particular pretenses so that somebody else could be living in the HDC house. So what was raised in the parliament, right, and it was of course under parliamentary privilege, is that this is the particular case here. There is this person has purchased a vehicle, but we're not sure that the person who purchased the vehicle is the person who actually using and driving the vehicle. And that's why it becomes important for us to guard against abuses of perks and benefits. So I don't have an issue with people having perks and benefits. I don't have an issue with people being in a position where they can get an exemption on the vehicle that they purchasing and driving, especially if it means that they're getting a remuneration package that is likely to decrease the possibility of them being open to bribery and corruption. But when you're accessing things like this, do it above board, right? Do it above board. It cannot be a situation where you're purchasing a vehicle, somebody else driving the vehicle. And that's why the Prime Minister on Saturday had to take off his belt for the media, because MP Monilal would have started talking about who greedy and who buying expensive vehicles. Media picks up MP Monilal's angle on the issue, and they're there going after Dayal Singh, they're there going after Stuart Young, but they're not pausing to ask the salient questions. Are people entitled to these things? And then eventually they decide it's not about legal or illegal. It's about, whether they ethically or morally you should be purchasing the vehicles at this time. Should Saddam and Ravi Ratiram ethically and morally purchase the vehicles at this time? That's a bullshit question, because it has nothing to do with whether they could ethically and morally purchase the vehicles. It's part of their remuneration package. They can. It's available to them. They're entitled to it. So you don't ask people if they're accessing something that they're entitled to, whether they should morally or ethically avail themselves of it. But what you should be asking the cabinet is, are you all going to consider putting caps on these exemptions? Are you going to consider putting other contingency measures in place to ensure that the exemption is not abused, or that the exemption does not become an avenue for corruption? Because when the Prime Minister started to reference the 2 Range Rovers that had the same numbers, what he was pointing to was how this vehicle exemption could become an avenue for corruption. When he referenced the fact that there is an MP who is currently under investigation for a vehicle purchase, what he was hinting at is that the exemption can become an avenue for corruption. So for me, the question that needed to be asked, if at all, on Saturday afternoon at this health press conference was, what measures is this sitting government ready and willing to put in place to ensure that there is no future abuse of the motor vehicle tax exemption? And that right there, for me, is the entire issue. You're going to see plenty noise for the rest of the week, because them screenshots that are put out on Sunday of all of these motor vehicle exemptions caused plenty panic in the UNC camp, right? So Kirk Mayhew come out today and he talking about how many people access multiple vehicles over the years, etc., etc., etc. Again, everybody legally entitled to the exemption. If he want to talk about abuse, we could talk about abuse. But let's also talk about what can be put in place. Because back in 2014, the reason no caps were put on the exemption is that the government and the opposition refused to accept the Salary Reviews Commission report that had caps on the exemption. So you had to stop and ask yourself, Do they actually want caps on the exemption? Or do they just want to be able to use the exemption and complain about it when it suits them? Right? So that's why I said I had to come here this evening and talk to all you about it. Because putting caps on the exemption, that ain't nothing new. A whole salary reviews commission sit down and put out a report indicating that they want to put a cap on the exemptions. They want to put a cap on the amount of tax that they could get away from not paying. And both opposition and government, and at that point in time, it would have been UNC in government, PNM in opposition. Both opposition and government at that point in time decided this report is not a true reflection of the kind of work that we're doing. Okay, fine. We are now in 2021. What are you prepared to do? Anything? Are you all prepared to agree to a cap on the motor vehicle exemption, or you just want to use it to sling mud? That's all I'm going to say. Right? So folks, take it easy. I will see you on Wednesday evening. And I'm hoping to get back to the Black Lives Matter conversation on Monday evening. But I'm hoping that now this helps you to understand all of the noise being made about this motor vehicle exemption and why people just on bare foolishness with the talk that's circulating about the motor vehicle exemption. All right. So I go on. I go and look for a man with a big ride.
Top right, top right, top right.